Everybody, welcome back. It's Patrick here with another episode of RevTalks. Today we're joined with Joey over at Gamma Point Advisory. How are you doing today, Joey?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you kind of talk briefly about what you guys are building in the technology space and who Gamma Point actually is for the audience as well?
Sure, thanks. So Gamma Point Advisory is a boutique advisory firm based in New York. We are specific to the logistics, supply chain, and transportation industries and all the adjacent technologies that are part of it. So I like to say that I live at the intersection of logistics, capital, and technology. The industry, as many probably know, is incredibly vital to the economy. It's probably 3% of the overall GDP in terms of logistics. But what's very relevant and timely to our discussion is the new avalanche of technology that's literally hitting our industry that is normally very resistant to change. It's very stodgy, very old, very adverse to technology. But now the industry has no choice but to adapt and adopt. So I spend a lot of my time translating all the latest technologies to capital markets as well as the operators of the logistics industry. Because people just don't understand the technology builders don't understand the industry. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time now, is kind of translating, especially with the advent of AI, explaining to all stakeholders which AI agents are real and which may be slideware and which are just, LLMs wrapped in a nice PowerPoint.
Absolutely. And when it comes on actually building proper technology, especially in the logistics space, what exactly does it take? I'm sure, as you mentioned, there's a lot of emergence of new technologies. What does that kind of look like?
So first, people who are building a technology can't do it from a textbook. Really people who have lived it, understood it, need to find a specific wedge or a moat, as we say, because any technology that comes and says, I can fix anything with an agent, that where there are any deficiencies or problems and reduce headcount anywhere in the supply chain, means they have nothing. So, for example, I work with some specific technologies that have found real needs. So, for example, any logistics company, whether it's in ocean freight, air freight, customs house, brokerage, carriers, they spend an inordinate amount of time, also in the brokerage space, quoting rates. So if you have a technology that helps eliminate all the emails and operating systems and connecting and, helps a person behind a desk give a quote to a customer in 5 minutes versus 5 days, that's a win. So those kinds of technologies are really, really valuable to the industry. Likewise, managing space on a ship, managing space on a plane or a train, managing rates. All this is the kind of stuff that AI agents can really help with. And that's where I'm finding the most opportunities are.
Absolutely. And on your end, I know we talked to briefly a little bit before the podcast, you're actually looking at scouting some different opportunity and currently working with some partners, obviously in the custom software development space. Can you kind of talk about that, as much as you can? What do those solutions kind of look like? What are they mainly helping out with, and how are they bringing
Yeah,
value to the company?
great question. So in full disclosure and transparency, Patrick, I get approached probably once or twice a week by, and I say this with loose quotes, the next best, greatest AI agent for supply chain. Everyone wants to get in because there is a huge opportunity here. And because supply chain and logistics is probably a decade behind other industries in terms of adapting technology, everyone thinks they've got the latest thing. So I look for something that is incredibly unique, that truly is something that's disrupting the current status quo. And I say that term specifically because it's overused, but something that's really new, that someone else can't replicate, that they can really hang their coat on and even have like a patent for. Those are the kinds of things that I look for, because I would say 9 out of 10 technologies that I get approached for, they're brilliant technology builders, but don't understand the industry. So if they've figured out something where there's an absolute need, and there are dozens of needs, that's when I'll listen. So that's when I'll partner with. But literally 99 out of 100 pitches I get, I reject, because if they can't explain to me in 30 seconds what they're going to solve for the customer or what they're going to provide for a capital investor, then they themselves haven't formed the value proposition.
Absolutely. So it sounds like right now you get approached by a litany of people that are actually looking at providing these solutions, because the technology space with logistics is a decade behind, as you mentioned before. Everybody thinks they have the latest, greatest thing. What you really value, at least in a partnership or somebody who actually can develop the specific custom software, is the ability to have deep technical expertise and also market expertise with the logistics space.
100%.
Somebody that
Yeah. And I lend my services. So all these technology builders, like, rather than me helping you find customers or raise money, let me help you with a go-to-market strategy, or before you even start looking for capital raises or going out to the market, because you can do a face plant, because these guys have short time and they get pitched, you know, big importers and big logistics providers, they get pitched technology, software services, all day, every day, and they're busy. So unless you can capture something that they need within a minute, a real elevator pitch, you're lost, and you don't have a second chance. You've got to go in there with a specific opportunity, with a specific wedge that you've tested as a real need in the industry. Otherwise, you're just creating, a demo for the sake of demos.
Absolutely. And so for you specifically, what has been kind of like a breakaway pitch for you? What have you seen or heard? Somebody has approached you and said, "Hey, Joey, XYZ can be built," or something that has just kind of captured your attention, and where you're saying, "Okay, this could be actually a new opportunity, different than the other 99%."
It's a great question. So I was approached by a startup. They're actually not even a startup anymore. And they said, listen, we work with custom sales brokerages. Now, custom sales brokerages in the industry is as important as the customs agents when you go into a country. Nothing can come into the country without proper customs clearance, the right identification, the right codes. And there was a technology that I found that eliminated all of the entry writing for what was called an entry writer at the logistics companies. And you could have 20 people doing hundreds and hundreds of files each week, and it could take weeks and weeks and weeks amount of work. I was approached by a technology company that said, I can eliminate all of that and have those people do more important things than just do entry writing, which is really just filling out forms. It's just populating data. And they eliminated all that. And they can do literally in an hour what would take an entry writer a week. And that's sexy. That's sexy. And that's something that they can really own, and it's very hard to replicate. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for when I want to partner with a company and help them grow, whether it's through buying other companies, getting investment, or go to market business development. Something like that is very specific. And like the example I gave you before, I was also approached by a company that had an AI agent, and all these people come from the industry. So they know, they've lived the pain points. The other one where they said, listen, I've lived in logistics. The amount of time spent on giving a customer a quote, and then 50% of the time it's wrong, is insane. So they built an AI agent that, to me, it's magic. I'm not smart enough to understand how they do it, but they literally can respond to a rate request in an hour that's polished, accurate, and clean versus 5 days that may be sloppy, both in terms of content and in terms of aesthetics.
Absolutely. And in this specific space too, being the logistics and kind of technology space, what excites you most? What is super exciting for you in the next couple of
So
years to really take the
what
space?
excites me in a very Patrick, it's a great question because when people are at cocktail parties, they don't talk about trucks and trains and ships and warehouses and ports and docks. We are a very unsexy industry going through a very sexy time. And I love the fact that literally the industry was left with no choice. We either adopt or we fail. So those that adopt and adapt to the technology, they're the ones that are going to succeed. And Patrick, it actually affects the valuation of a company. So I'm a mergers and acquisition boutique organization at its heart. And the right technology can change the valuation of a company. Likewise, the wrong technology can affect the company to the detriment. So if I'm advising on customers to sell their company, they have to have adjacent technologies, AI or other, that'll make it more attractive, that'll get them more money on the sell side. Likewise, on the buy side, when I evaluate customers, I want to make sure that they have the right technologies that strengthen what we call EBITDA, the value of the company, versus just being noise. So this is a whole new paradigm shift that's going on in our industry that I've never seen. Probably this hasn't happened since the Industrial Revolution when we invented ships. So that's kind of what excites me.
I see. And I've noticed too, I mean, we're now entering a space where I think I saw some statistic where it was like 2 or 3 person company headcount is now scaling to IPOing at 1 billion or something crazy like that, to where we have the not just automation through the systems and the technology that's possible to really just kind of like essentially streamline an entire company.
It's entirely correct. So I speak with private equity firms in the capital markets, private equity and venture capital, but the private equity firms or the private equity industry, which is, it's taking over every industry, they're just here to stay. They're really sexy about, and they're very bullish on our industry. But the first thing to talk about is technology. It's literally the first question they have. They don't even need to understand it, but they understand enough that the right acquisition has to have the right technology or open to the right technology to have exponential growth. So like you said, if they don't want 2x, they want 100x on an acquisition, and technology plays a big weight in that.
Exactly. And recently, a close friend of mine as well here in Austin, Texas, he was really focusing on selling to private equity or some sort of investment firm with a solution that services in HVAC
Yeah.
businesses, because this technology is so like it's so plug and play. I mean, literally
Yep.
any HVAC business here in the United States can service from it, and it's software, and it's almost a SaaS play, and especially right now, as you mentioned, private equity people in that space are very bullish on, brick and mortar in terms of like HVAC companies, these kind
Yep.
of more traditional plumbing companies too. They really like
Uh,
that.
You're dead on. I hear about HVAC all the time. It's not my specialty, but I watch it from the sidelines. Again, not an industry you talk about in cocktail parties over champagne. But yeah, there's a lot going on. And I talked about private equity, but the venture capitalists, the people who are actually investing in startups, also very bullish in our industry. But again, they want to see something that's going to be the next Amazon, the next Uber. Flexport is a big company that raised billions of dollars in venture capital. So even for the people who are investing in startups, having the right story that differentiates themselves from others. Because again, the venture capitalists, they'll invest in 100 companies, hoping one of them is that next unicorn. So, those are conversations that I'm having as well. So when I talk to these technologists that are building what they think the next greatest software is, and they're looking for a venture capitalist to invest a check with lots of zeros, you have one shot. And if you don't wow them, and these venture capitalists are brilliant, they can tell within a minute what's real and what's not. You have to have your story right.
Absolutely. And my entire philosophy too, what I've been battling with these two school of thoughts is like, do you believe in more of kind of like get the actual proof of concept up front first and really get revenue in there and then really have that kind of exit play and go for funding later on? Or are you more of just like before anything even goes to market, why don't we raise funds? What's kind of your philosophy on that?
So,
Typically there's two
so
types
the,
of
the
people.
answer, and that's another great question, Patrick. You've done this before. So the answer to that is yes. So it really depends on the situation. So I used to argue the former versus the latter, meaning, well, let's get everything in place before we do anything. But there is an argument to, like, what? Let's just get it somewhat understood on the back of a napkin, raise some money, and figure it out later. And I've played in both those in both those playgrounds. I've danced in both those weddings and barbecued in both those barbecues. Both can work, but both have drawbacks. I was with us, so I've been through 3 tech startups in logistics in my life. I've been through about $100 million of capital raise from seed or angel all the way to C rounds. And in one case, the back of a napkin got us $3 million. It was just on an idea. The second case, we couldn't get a proper seed round after napkins and demos. So it really depends on the actual value that you're sharing that may resonate with an investor or with or a user. So it really on a case by case, but it's a very fair question, and I would take that on a case by case depending on what I see.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. It's definitely case by case basis. It's not black and white. And as you mentioned before, I mean, there's unicorns in both sides. There's outliers in each end where a company
Agreed.
that's
Agreed.
bootstrapped, like, like ClickFunnels with Russell Brunson, if you're familiar with that,
100%.
goes to a billion. And then,
Exactly.
another company that's funded goes crazy too. So it's definitely a lot of different factors as well. And once again, too, for the audience, what exactly is the company website? Where can we find you on the internet for
Yeah.
them?
So anyone that wants to talk, look, I'll talk to anybody. I've been doing this for 35 years, Patrick. I'm actually finishing a book on this exact topic. It's going to be called Move the Weight, which is, Gamma Point at the intersection of logistics, technology, and capital. You can go to gammapointadvisory.com or send me an email to joseph@gammapointadvisory.com. And I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone. No commitment needed, available to talk. And I just want to see our industry that I've been in for 35 years, succeed, because there's a lot of consolidation, a lot of technology infusion. So we're at a huge inflection point, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation.
Absolutely, Joseph. Well, I appreciate your time here today on RevTalks. Hope you have a great rest of your morning as well.
Great, Patrick. Thanks. Anytime.